and welcome back to Literally Literary. If this is your first time joining us, be sure to check out our previous episodes. Last episode, we discussed our favorite moments for the second half of Natalia Sylvester's running. This episode, we will give a general overview of Real Life by Brandon Taylor.
All right, thank you for that. So welcome back. We had a little mini hiatus. Three of us have been real busy with real life, you could say, and academic life too. So
it was great, man. Well said.
Yeah. Hope everyone is doing well, and this year is one of those years, of course. We wanted to give our condolences to and our thoughts to the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We had just found out this weekend, and but we have a book that we're really excited to talk about here. This is a novel unlike anything I think we've covered, and it's also a debut novel.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Real Life by Brandon Taylor, published this year by Riverhead, which is an imprint of
Penguin, right?
Penguin, here in the US. And in the UK, it was published by Daunt Books, which is part of actually started as an indie bookshop over in the UK. So this book has gotten a lot of recognition so far, it just came out earlier this year. So it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, which is, of course, one of the biggest literary achievements you can imagine. And the winner will be announced in November. So we're really excited about that for Brandon, and as fans of the book and fans of literature in general.
Yeah, it's great to see a debut book with such ferocity and get such recognition right away. So, and it's heavy. There's some good stuff to unpack.
Yeah. Vanessa, what were your first impressions of this one?
I like it. I like the way he describes people. Not only the characters, but like people he sees.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, the narrative voice is I think very noteworthy. I think you were talking about this Richie pre-show, that it kind of reminded you of like Virginia Woolf.
Yeah, when I think of Virginia Woolf and studying British literature, for example, one of the things I remember the most is when Woolf talks about how she imagines characters with these tunnels, right? That there's a depth to them that as a writer you uncover little by little, and even and there's other stories too, like Remains of the Day by Ishiguro, like that kind of explore themes of memory and unraveling characters in doing so, like pasts and how it's connected to the present, and even the future.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, Vanessa, for this episode we wanted to provide that overview of the characters and the themes and the style for readers. And before we get to the characters, I don't know what you all thought about the epigraph from the Book of Job. It reminds me of there's also a epigraph from Scripture in Ben Science's Kentucky Club, a beatitude. That's right. So here it's Job chapter 7 verse 3. I am allotted months of emptiness, and nights of misery are apportioned to me. And so you get this idea from the very beginning that there's going to be a test, just like Job was tested by Satan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you have any kind of familiarity, that Book of Job is not an easy one to go through, through his experiences and tests. I'm not that literate in the Bible. or at least in depth. But I understood that much.
Yeah.
Like, oh, if you're gonna choose this as to start your book, there's gonna be some exploring here to do.
Yeah. It's, when someone is in a very dark place, and it seems like all hope is lost. I think that's kind of interesting because I think there's many of us who feel that way this year.
Especially 2020, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Vanessa, what else did you want to say about the opening and kind of the way that the characters are introduced?
Well, there's this line on page 29 that I think is really interesting and goes to the role that Wallace, the main character in the book, places on like people and their like lives. It says he glanced at them briefly and wondered what shapes their lives held, if they were content, if they were mad or frustrated. He just like observes other people, I think, a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. It's a very observational point of view, and yet he's also he's that like participant observer, right? That like you have in labs, which is interesting, of course, because he himself is a laboratory scientist, as a biochemist, so it brings up this interesting intersection of the academic world, but also the very real friendships and relationships that he ends up encountering throughout.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think of the chapters here? There's about 9 of them. They're lengthier than usual, right? So this is about a 300-page novel. So the first chapter, what did you think about the opening characters?
I think it's really interesting to see how Wallace interacts with each of these characters, especially the way he interacts with Emma, I think. Yeah, Emma. With Miller, his interactions, and then his interactions with Cole and Vincent. You kind of get to see already who he is with these people, even though he feels like he doesn't really necessarily belong with them.
Did you want to share with the readers like the why that is? If they haven't read the book, like what is it about that he feels kind of out of place, or like he kind of sticks out? I guess one would be that he's not in a relationship. Not everyone is, but I think that there's couples and people who are dating and what have you. So that's one reason.
I think he also just struggles with opening up to people. He tends to keep to himself and just not really go out of his way to interact with other people.
And interestingly, he's also queer, and yet some of the other characters are. So he's not the only one, but he's Black, and I think we have talked about queer characters before with Ben Sines, but not in terms of intersectionality, which I can't remember the name of the theorist who came up with that idea, but it's
Patricia Hill Collins.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, a Black scholar, right? Black woman. And so we haven't looked at that intersection yet, and I think it's really interesting how Brandon, the writer here, explores that. He's also an outsider. So he's not. The university that they're at isn't specified, but it's somewhere in the Midwest, right? And he's from the South, so there is that too. The adjustment to that kind of world.
I think alongside the importance that all of these relationships play, another important, I guess, theme that we see is memory. A lot of these experiences that Wallace is going through,
Mm-hmm.
he ties them back to memories and things he's already experienced and relates them to one another, I guess, kind of to see how he should maneuver through the situations.
Yeah, I mean, kind of reminds me a little bit of Nick Carraway from Great Gatsby, you know, because we're kind of getting this perspective where like he's presenting us all these characters, right? And but we're also getting his point of view, right? Obviously, and I think like you say with some of these characters, he's tentative at times, and you know, you already mentioned some of them, right? But you know, readers can expect, for instance, that like with one of the characters, you know, that they have a little uh, you know, they end up hooking up together, right? And I think one of the things that really stood out to me about this book is, you know, from the beginning is that tenderness between characters. Like you said, he has difficulty opening up, but when he is able to open up, like it kind of really, you know, Brandon's description of these scenes is very erotic, and yet it's also very I don't know how to describe it, like I said, but like tender and sensual and genuine too. You know, it all seems very genuine.
Authentic human connection
Mm-hmm.
that kind of comes from letting walls down.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
exactly. And so you mentioned, you know, Miller, Vincent, Cole. There's also Dana, you know, whom we see. How would you describe her?
She's very much not the kind of person who wants to be told what to do or how to do things. She right off the bat just doesn't like Wallace because he tries to help her, I guess. Or he looks at it as trying to help her and she doesn't see it that way. And so she gets very upset, and then it kind of starts like I think in her eyes more than his, like a rivalry between the two.
And I think that's another great thing about this novel is how it does so accurately capture the infighting and clickety nature of academia. You know, here it's the sciences, right? You know, they're all like working in the lab, and you know, you do get really like the microscope really does zoom in to like, you know, the nitty gritty of like, you know, learning a lot about biology. But at the same time, you know, you also have the macroscopic world where you see someone like Dana, and you know, how you know, whether it's a postdoc or like, you know, in the graduate student world, where they know, you know, they're going to have to compete, they might be competing for the same job in the future, right?
Same job. I mean, it can get like that, right? When you're competing for even funding or grants or rewards, prizes.
One of the things that is notable though, and this kind of you learn from the very beginning, I think you had mentioned it, Vanessa, in the pre-show, is it was in that beginning passage where he describes, right here on page 4, this is one of the first where he's describing the characters, and you know, he mentions that for his class or their class, you know, the first in more than 3 decades to include a black person, you know, and it does goes to show that still academia is very, very white relative to the general population. And I think it's something that you that is of course not exclusive to the sciences, you know, but I remember, for instance, one of my heroes in the sciences is Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he always mentions that in astrophysics, you know, he was one of the first black people who, you know, rose up the ranks and was able to, you know, I think it was can't remember if it was Princeton or whatever it was, but I think it's a very important conversation about gatekeeping.
Oh yeah. Which is it's kind of an aside since you mentioned DeGrasse Tyson. He gets a lot of criticism for like his pop science kind of
Oh yeah.
personality,
Hmm.
but I just think it's so important to be that person that maybe kids will see maybe themselves and
Right.
in that field.
Right.
So I mean, but yeah, as you mentioned here, 3 decades, right, in that program.
Yeah.
It's quite some time.
What else, Vanessa?
Um,
You mentioned the theme of memory. I think did you want to mention anything more about that, or talk about another theme?
I think Wallace also struggles with like anxieties and insomnia for sure. And the way that it's like described, the way that it's written
Mm-hmm.
to describe like all of the anxiety is really like you can almost feel it. I think. Like on page, I guess like 60?
Mm-hmm.
69, sorry, page 69. So he's thinking about all the work he has to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I really related to this one. So he's talking about how things feel impossible, but only because you know you have to do them, not because you can't do them. Like, because they're things that you can do, but they feel like you can't do them.
Yeah. Which passage exactly?
Right at the top of the page.
Mm.
It says, it feels impossible in the way only possible tasks can seem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love those moments in the book, where the narrator's voice comes through. And I think, part of the book is also about, and this, you can kind of get from the book jacket, but, something you learn reading it is just navigating the academic world as someone who is Black and someone who is queer. And it reminds me of, James Baldwin, comes to mind, one of my inspirations and heroes. Right from the very beginning, we talked about this a little bit pre-show, but there's a scene with Tom and Emma, who are a couple, and Emma kisses Wallace, our narrator, and then Tom, comes in and they have a little scene, right? And she has to explain that they're friends, right? So it reminds me of a little bit of Get Out, because in that movie you see like all these encounters with how different it is when you're Black, right? How different it is when you're rendered invisible or othered. So that's one of the things that really jumps out to me. And so besides the lab partners that he has, we mentioned Dana. There's Henrik that who comes in later on, right? And he's kind of like this mentor figure for him, and he's kind of interesting too, because like he's like this football player type, that you wouldn't think of would be in the lab. Part of the book, I think, and this you find out from chapter 1, is also about grief and how we mourn, and it's something we've talked about with the other books that we've covered in our previous seasons. But I think it's something that here it goes back to his reluctance to just be an open book, right? And you find out there's a scene that kind of flashbacks, right, to why the relationship with his late father was so strained. But it's something where I think it's not that uncommon, where like you become estranged, and so people expect you to like be sad, so like you end up being sad, but you kind of you're not really sad, because the way that the relationship was. So he's in like that awkward limbo of like, well, should I grieve him? Should I be grieving him? But
Yeah.
if people expect me to, is that genuine?
And I think he like wants to mourn, but he doesn't know how. And because he mentions that his insomnia has gotten worse since, or because his father passed. And I think he talks about it with Miller.
Yeah.
He talks about how, well, Miller talks about his relationship with his mother. And he kind of relates it to like, you don't have to feel sad, but it's okay if you are, even if you weren't close to them.
Right.
It's okay to still feel like there's something that's missing there.
Right. Yeah, I think that of course, ends up bringing them closer together. And I think Brandon does a really engrossing job of like getting into the mind of these characters in terms of the like I have been saying, it's like we don't have to do it if you don't want to, right? And even if we do it, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, and so it kind of goes into that, like explores like the openness of love. There's a discussion later on in the book about how with Vincent, and then Cole, right? How they're kind of like on thin ice, and Cole feels that like Vincent is like cheating on him, because he says, just looking at an app where you're like dating or you're looking to see who to date, that's cheating. But Vincent had mentioned, and he had an argument about this, that, well, because there was a French dude who came into the picture, and he had kind of brought up this idea and put it in his head that why not have an open relationship, where we can have a third person. And I think, that's, Wallace there is kind of there to support him, but also to kind of push back and say, well, like, why not, right? Like, why not talk about it more? Why not, and kind of looking at, well, what is cheating, right? Is it looking at, or is it actually doing, getting involved with someone? So I find that really interesting too. What do y'all think of of just the writing style? I mean, we've talked about how it's very descriptive, but compared to like the other works,
like in terms of characters,
more in terms of like
prose style.
Yeah, like
the writing style.
Yeah. And like, is it easy to follow, or
it's very. I think it's definitely really easy to follow. I went through it so fast, like whatever so far.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think like you had said, that the really rich description of the setting, both the laboratory, but also like the like there's herons in one section, right? Like the nature itself, the minds of the characters, right? It's just all really rich. And so it's really easy to be able to get into your mind's eye to picture, who, what, where, and all that.
Yes.
Did y'all want to talk about just to close up, did y'all want to talk about the cover? It's a pretty different cover from, as you saw.
Right. You pointed it out in the pre-show that the UK cover is different than this US. I love this cover. I mean, that would have drawn my eye at the bookstore. You know, I know we always joke about it here. Don't judge a book by its cover, but sometimes you're just drawn in by pretty designs and covers. And here we have a sparrow. What is that? Like a
Yeah, looks like it.
on some kind of like blocks. I'm sure that's maybe like a scientific chart or something, or reading of some sort. Or am I just overthinking that?
No, yeah, because what do they call those little clear things they put to like read under the microscope?
The slides.
Yeah, the slides. But
What's something there? I mean, I kind of like how it's perched and
yeah,
it's inquisitive. But yeah, the difference in that and the UK version is interesting. What can you say about the UK title cover?
yeah. So I believe in the UK, it's got like an illustration, right, of Wallace. Is it, or is it
a
a
picture of him?
Yeah, or is it
I haven't seen.
Oh, okay.
Let me
Or
look it up. Yeah, it's interesting having the two other covers. I mentioned also pre-show. I'm a big fan of the cover mentions how Brandon is a senior editor of Electric Literature's recommended reading, and a staff writer at LitHub. And I like to follow both of those. Pretty fun follows on Twitter.
yeah, those are great. They put out great literature articles. And then Brandon himself is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the University of Iowa. And notably, he was an Iowa Arts Fellow, right? And at the very well-known and well-renowned Iowa Writers Workshop. So it's no surprise then, to already see with his debut novel, him getting this recognition with the Booker. So it's got the blurb from Casey Lehman, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, who wrote Heavy. And Roxane Gay, who's a prominent African-American woman writer and kind of a very outspoken, in terms of politics and so forth. Anything else?
Well, I just read this interview of the designer of the book jacket from the US. And she says that she did some research about the gel electrophoresis. So I think that's what these are, the bars.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And in the imagery throughout the book, there's a lot of birds. And so
what kind of data is that supposed to represent the gel foresis? Or who's the designer?
Her name is Grace Han. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we have talked about in the past, like the relationship between, I mean, obviously, when we read Grace's books, she worked hand in hand with their illustration. So it's great, I think, when it also has to do really nicely with the book.
Yeah. And so, this was our opening look at it. We're really excited to keep talking about it. So we're looking at having 2 more episodes on this. So if you all, haven't picked it up, please do. Especially if you like me or kind of a book nerd, getting the first edition that doesn't have that Booker, might not have the or might soon have, that Booker sticker on it, once it comes out, the winner is announced in November. So we'll see.
Yeah. Maybe you have the feature version and you're listening to this as it is the Booker winner.
Yeah.
So best of luck in that.
Yeah.
In that regard. And hopefully you're enjoying it. You're reading along. Definitely pick it up. Pick it up.
Is there a paperback yet?
I haven't seen.
I don't think so, not yet.
Yeah, because it already came out probably next year. So hardcover.
When it wins the prize, we'll have it on the cover.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for joining us on this week's episode discussing Real Life by Brandon Taylor. And if you haven't read it, we hope we inspire you to pick up a copy. Follow us on Instagram at literallyliterary.ep and on Twitter at literallylitep. Bye.